The cell was barely larger than a scullery pantry. The stone walls wept in the October chill, their damp breath seeping into the straw mattress, where Marie Antoinette, now simply called the Widow Capet, sat in her tattered chemise. The Queen of France no longer had silk gowns, only a plain white cap to hide the thinning hair hacked short after her last failed escape. Once, Versailles had been her prison of etiquette. Now, the concierge was her true cage. Iron-barred windows, a single guard's chair outside her door, and a small wooden table where a chipped mug of thin broth went cold each night. Since Louis's execution in January, she had been a widow in more than name. Her son, Louis Charles, should have been king the moment his father's head fell, but the revolutionaries called him simply the son of Capet and treated him like a dangerous relic of the old order. On July 3rd, 1793, they came for him. Guards wrenched the 8-year-old from Marie's arms in the Temple prison, ignoring her screams and the desperate way she clung to him. He would outlive her, but not by much. It was a small blessing she didn't know how his story ended. He was placed under the care of Antoine Simon, a coarse, fanatical cobbler chosen to re-educate Louis Charles as a Republican citizen. In truth, it was a sentence of slow annihilation. Locked in a small, windowless cell, the boy lived among filth, vermin, and the stench of his own waste. He was beaten, starved, and plied with alcohol, kept so isolated that his voice grew weak from lack of use. Revolutionary officials forced him to sign a grotesque false confession accusing his mother of molestation, a charge designed to humiliate her at trial and destroy what little moral standing she had left. For more than 2 years, he was left in that darkness, denied sunlight, fresh air, and human kindness. By the time he died, June 1795, not yet 11 years old, his body was covered in open sores and crawling with lice, his small frame wasted by malnutrition and neglect. Marie never saw him again, though the knowledge of his suffering followed her into her final hours like a shadow she did not escape. Her trial had been a parade of cruelty, charges of treason, of conspiring with foreign powers, and even the obscene lies extracted from her son. She met them all with the straight-backed composure of a woman who had been born to be watched. But she was thinner now, the angles of her face sharper, her famously luminous skin turned pale and mottled in the prison gloom. On the morning of October 16th, 1793, they came for her. She dressed deliberately in a simple white gown, the color of mourning for French queens, and refused a veil, determined to meet her fate unhidden. They bound her hands behind her back and seated her in an open cart for the journey across Paris to the Place de la Révolution. The city jeered and spat as she passed, but she kept her eyes forward, lips pressed in prayer. At the scaffold, she stumbled and accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot. "Pardon me, monsieur," she said softly. "I did not mean to do it." Those were her last words. The blade fell at 12:15, and the crowd roared. The woman who had once been the most glittering figure in Europe, accused of stealing bread from the mouths of her people, was gone. But the terror was far from over. The guillotine's appetite was insatiable, and its next course would be the very men who had fed it. I'm Shallon Lester. Welcome to Crowned and Cancelled. Marie Antoinette's death wasn't the start of the French Revolution. It was the gruesome climax of forces that had been brewing for decades. Because you don't just wake up one morning, sharpen a guillotine, and decide to topple a monarchy. France had been simmering in resentment, debt, and rivalry long before the Queen ever lost her head. And to understand how we got from Versailles silk gowns to blood in the streets, we need to rewind, not to Paris, but actually to France's oldest obsession, beating England at all costs. If you're an American, you're probably viewing France and England as neighbors, bros, kinda, sorta, decently similar, right? No. Maybe now that's true, but for literally the entirety of history prior to World War I, these two countries were very much not bros, very much not friends. In fact, France and England had been locked in a generational grudge match for centuries, from the 100 Years' War to the French and Indian War to the War of 1812, fights over colonies, blah, 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 blah. I mean, there were jillions of squabbles back and forth and scrapes between the two powers. And let's not forget that pesky little Revolutionary War with England and America. When the American colonies revolted in 1776, France saw a glittering chance to destroy Britain, not by force, but by finance, and happily forked over money. A lot of money to the Americans, plus, give or take, a few 100,000 troops. The French chalked this up to the snake versus mongoose vibe going between these two countries. At the time, French Foreign Minister Charles Gravier, Comte de Vergennes, wrote, "England is the natural enemy of France." So France funneled millions into the American Revolution, not out of love for liberty, but out of pure, bitter spite for England. And what's that phrase about revenge? You better dig 2 graves? Yeah. Cost to France was financial collapse. You see, France didn't exactly have an overflowing treasury. The royal family, headed by Louis XVI, and his spendy little glamour puss of a wife, Marie Antoinette, acted like money grew on trees. Louis, who was nice enough but a total pushover, was constantly waffling about whether or not to tax the nobility. And at the time, they didn't pay any. So, trying to be like of the people, he'd announced that, yes, I'm going to tax the nobility, and the citizens would rejoice. Why should they be the only ones coughing up to keep the kingdom afloat? They were working the land belonging to the nobles. They didn't have much to show for it. Not profit sharing, not ownership of anything, just taxes on taxes on taxes. And they weren't even getting very much for these taxes. Things were very much not good for the peasant class. Crop failures had led to major wheat crises, and the people were without bread. I mean, I get it, it's swimsuit season. I'm not over here eating bread either. But to the French, bread was the cornerstone of their diet and accounted for 80% of their monthly budget. Bread! So when rumors spread that Marie Antoinette quipped, "Well, if they don't have bread, let them eat cake," which, by the way, she actually did not say, but we'll talk about her life in more detail in a later episode. But listen, even the rumor that she said that really did not go over well. It would be like Melania Trump telling the residents of Flint, Michigan, "Well, if you don't have water, drink champagne," or whatever her accent is. It would be a bad look. And the bad look over the monarchy only got bad lookier when Louis backed out of his plan to tax the nobles. A few times. And every time he reneged on his promise, people got a little angrier and a little hungrier. There was a saying then, and still true now, you're only 9 meals away from a revolution. Think about it. That's about 3 days without food. How willing would you be to respect your king when you couldn't feed your family? So imagine the vibe then, when instead of supplying his own people with food, he starts writing massive checks to the Americans so that they can depose the King of England. Look, as an American, we know we wouldn't be a country without France and their intervention. But they nearly lost their own country as a result. Because as the people starved, they, ironically, started to get some very revolutionary ideas from those plucky, pissed-off Americans. Wait a minute. So, you're telling me you can depose a king? Well, no, a British king, but not like, not us. No. You do not depose a French king, only a British king. I don't know about that. It kind of seems like a king is a king is a king. And so, the French Revolution begun. Here's the thing with revolutions, though. They usually fail. They're kind of like that frenemy who's like, "Girl, I'm going to be brutally honest," and then says the harshest thing you have ever heard in your life, and you start to realize, this bitch is much more about brutality than honesty. So yeah, revolutions, from this one to communism to Black Lives Matter, they claim they're about freedom and equality and justice and the common man. But when you peer a little closer, at best, they're a slick psyop to just swap unchecked power from this side to that side. And at worst, there's not even that much of a plan. Just brutality. And very little honesty. The architect of the French Revolution was a man named Maximilien Robespierre. A man who was raised by relatives after his mom died when he was 6 years old and his father had ran off. I mention this as the main fact to know about him because one massive through line on all deranged men in history is mommy issues. And if you've ever dated a guy with a toxic or absentee mom, girl, I know you feel me on this. Only I bet your ex wasn't responsible for the beheading of thousands of people, n'est-ce pas? The other main aspect of Robespierre's villain origin story, and the second biggest commonality with demented men, was that Robespierre was a scholarship kid. He attended the prestigious Lycée Louis le Grand in Paris on scholarship, and being surrounded by wealth but not actually of that class put, I would say, a pretty big chip on his shoulder. He went on to become a lawyer who defended the poor and, you guys get this, rallied against the death penalty, which absolutely blows my mind. And as anti-king sentiments grew and became more and more radical, so did Robespierre. He soon became a leading figure of the Committee of Public Safety, basically the BLM of late 1700s France. And by the way, if you have a problem with me trashing BLM, you might want to double check the name of this podcast and also just go ahead and triple check who I am as a person. I am not woke and I am not politically correct. And you know what I'm also not? Usually wrong. I have a pretty good bead on character and how things look from a bird's eye view. And if you think I'm a monster, just remember, in the case of a revolution, you want someone like me on your side. But anyway, side note, beware of any group that uses the word safety. 9 times out of 10, this group's main goal is oppression and the destruction of rights. I mean, look at what happened after September 11th. You had the Department of Homeland Security that suddenly was just like, I don't know, maybe gonna tap people's phones or like hack into their emails or keep records and put people in Guantanamo Bay. But this was about safety, people. This was about safety. Trust me. But look, this French Committee of Public Safety in France, 1700s, started out with some good ideas, as a lot of these groups do. I mean, if they all came out and they're like, hey, we actually just hate white people, we hate Muslim people, we're gonna lock people up with no trial, we're gonna loot a city, that's kind of hard to get on board with. You have to appeal to hearts and minds. So this group led with the positive. Give the people more power, less taxes, civil rights, and a constitutional monarchy, which is what England has today. You have a king, but you also have a parliament that one informs the other. And so Robespierre loudly positioned himself as the moral authority of the revolution, calling himself the incorruptible. Another side note, do not trust someone who gives himself their own nickname. They are psychotic. But as the revolution progressed, good ideas gave way to bloodlust, mayhem, and a mad grab for personal power. He decided that, actually, the only good noble was a dead noble. Fuck diplomacy. Fuck the middle ground. Fuck the king. Once he had sliced and diced Louis and Marie Antoinette, he just kind of went through his burn book and had frilly, harmless princesses, useless but fairly benign dukes, even their maids and servants, all put to the guillotine. And then Robespierre made the biggest mistake any revolutionary can, doing too much too soon. Do people want change? Well, yeah. I mean, if you ask the French bourgeoisie for their list of gripes, food, wars, taxes, all big ticket items. But how many minutes constituted an hour? Yeah, I don't know. No, that's not like a pressing concern. Maximilien Robespierre, drunk with power, and look, because he's French, probably just plain drunk, and don't at me, I am French. Arrête. He decided that upending the government with actually no backup plan was not enough. No. Let's move on to public enemy number 2. The clocks and the calendar. Yes, that stuff that everyone's pissed about. So the Gregorian calendar, which is what we use today, created by the Catholic Church and with its roots in paganism, like August for Augustus, July, Julius Caesar. Boo, Gregorian calendar, boo. And that 7-day week, it's based on biblical creation. Boo, hiss, boo. Saints' days, Christian holidays, even the names of months, all going back to the drawing board. Robespierre wanted a rational, secular, and scientific calendar for the new republic, nothing to do with religion whatsoever. So it was introduced in October 1793, but they backdated it to start on September 22nd, 1792, the day that France became a republic. So when he started all of this, it was no longer 1793, it was year 2. And then he divided 12 months into 30 days. So every month now had a solid 30 days. And he renamed each month to reflect nature and agriculture rather than saints or pagan origin. He had months called vintage, fog, frost, snow, germination, flowers, meadows. Like, it kind of is cute, but no one was asking for the months to be renamed. But he did not stop there. Each month was no longer 4 weeks of 7 days. It was 3 weeks of 10 days, called decades. Oh, for God's sakes, that meant only one rest day every 10 days, not like a 2-day weekend. You didn't get Saturday and Sunday off anymore in a 7-day week. You only had 1 day off every 10 days. So for the man who claims he's like of the people, how is this helping workers? You went from 6 days off a month to 3? Your work life felt endless. And then this asshole moved on to the clock. He tried to redo time itself. Each day was now divided into 10 hours, and each hour had 100 minutes, and each minute had 100 seconds. In practice, this was a complete nightmare. Nobody wanted to redo their daily rhythm, sundials, clocks didn't line up, and it made coordinating with the rest of Europe impossible. To Robespierre, oh, this mattered, this was symbolic. By breaking apart the calendar and the clock, they were severing France from its royal and Catholic past. But it also showed how demented and extreme the revolution had become, as most revolutions do. It wasn't just about killing kings, but about recreating society itself from scratch. By 1806, Napoleon had come along and he was like, this is fucking retarded, we're not doing this. And so he completely undid all of this clock nightmare bullshit and went back to the way that everyone knew and understood. But that was 13 years of this 100-minute day. I don't even know. I can't even get my head around it, okay? I couldn't do it for 13 years. I'd be chopping people's heads off too. And if you think that fucking with the clocks wasn't bad enough, Robespierre made the catastrophic mistake of messing with the one thing all people of the age had very specific ideas about: their religion. Nowadays, people are much less religious, and it's hard to kind of really get a sense of what religion meant to people. It was the thing that they just didn't think about in terms of, well, is this true, is this not? It simply was true. Whether they were Jewish or Muslims from the Ottoman Empire or Catholics or Protestant, they believed in something. Almost no one was like, yeah, I don't know if religion's for me. No. 98% of the French were strict Roman Catholics at the time. And the revolution came in and seized a lot of the church-owned lands in France as their own and started taking the revenue from that. And then they made priests swear fealty to the revolution instead of the Pope. And half of these priests were like, are you fucking crazy? No! Over the Pope, God's representative on earth? You just chopped the head off of a guy who said he was also God's representative on earth. And that's another thing that's really hard for us to kind of understand in this day and age, is that kings at the time, people like Louis, they genuinely, and I mean like no BS, genuinely believed that God anointed them to be the leader. That any thought they had was not like, oh, their own thoughts. It was a message from God. This is what they had been told their entire life, what everyone in their family had been told in their entire lives. And so for Robespierre and the revolution to come along and say, no, this is bullshit. You're not like a representative of God on earth. People aren't just going to swear allegiance to you because you say so, fuck you. But then to turn around and say to priests, actually, we need you to swear allegiance to us because we say so. But we're not representative of God on earth, the gods you all very much believe in. Like, none of it actually made sense. And this really went a long way in pissing the people off. Like kings, okay, whatever. God, popes, priests? No, dude, you didn't fuck with them. You didn't like excommunicate them and denounce them and strip away their power in the land and say that the Pope's not really the Pope. You just didn't do that. There had to be limits. But Robespierre didn't believe in limits. I mean, he probably would have guillotined the Pope if someone would have backed him up. And so instead, Robespierre rebranded God. The man tried to rebrand God. Okay? He's like, no, we're not calling anything God or however it's pronounced, Jod. No, the new thing is the supreme being. And he made some weird gay festival about it. It was awful. This was pretty much the tipping point for him in terms of public support. Because look, the lesson here is that no matter how much people say, oh, I want massive change, I just want massive change in my life. You know what, dude? They don't. They want their basics covered. They want food, they want safety. But beyond that, usually folks are fine with the status quo when it really comes down to it, even if to us, their status quo looks intolerable. I mean, look at your friends. Your bestie will bitch to high heaven about her fuck-ass boyfriend, but will she actually leave? No. She will say she wants to move to New York and write a book, but does she? No. And look, if you murdered her boyfriend and rented her an apartment in New York, she would come unglued, right? Sweeping change is actually not realistic or even really desirable for most people. And that's okay. But if you're going to head a revolution, you need to spend some more time on psychology of what people actually want and can handle without freaking out and feeling wildly out of control, and less time on redoing the goddamn clock. Clock's not the problem, bro. You know what happens when someone feels like their foundation, from the government to their God, has been ripped away? They overcorrect. If you look at the chaotic nonsense of woke America, from emotional support ostriches to Z, zoom, zoop pronouns, and I am not even kidding you, this is a real area of study, the unseen body in creative spaces of exposure and erasure of the queer. That sentence literally does not even make sense. Someone has a degree in this. Someone did a thesis on this. Listen, when you take all of that insanity into account, Donald Trump's popularity is not such a shock. I'm not doing a commentary either way on the guy. I didn't vote for him, but I get it. He is the natural overcorrection from too much freedom to possibly too little. He's a weighted blanket, a too tight hug, a daddy. And daddy isn't always pleasant. Daddy is stern, he's punishing, he's pig-headed, but he is decisive. He is unwavering. And that, when you are afraid, reads as strong. And when you're scared, exhausted, disrupted, strong is all you want, even if it comes at the expense of a few freedoms. This is why your friend stays with the idiot boyfriend, why she stays in the toxic work environment. Or maybe, girl, maybe it's why you do. Do you value stability over freedom? If you do, look, you're not alone. The good people of France, and honestly, most other places, can very much match your freak on this. Because at the end of the day, a lot of us just kind of do want daddy to lay us on our back and tell us what to do, right? Our brain is, above all things, the great risk machine. Its entire job is to keep you alive, and that means constantly assessing risk, whether you're sizing up a growling animal or a political movement. And when you have a party that says, no, the halls of government are a tennis court, this is real. Actually, after the revolution, they were so loosey-goosey and had so not a plan that the new parliament was meeting on a tennis court. Like, if we overthrew our government and suddenly Congress was at Applebee's, I don't think people would feel great about that. So if you have a party that says, yeah, the government's at tennis courts, I hope pickleball doesn't come on. Or we'll chop off your head if you disagree. Or we'll cancel you. Or maybe that person with a beard, an Adam's apple, square hips, and XY chromosomes is definitely a woman. Okay, fuck you. Your risk machine is going to go into overdrive. And is it really any wonder that studies show how radical liberals are the most anxious, depressed, and miserable people in society? Their risk machine is going haywire, trying to make sense of this nonsense rhetoric. So when we look at history or politics through the lens of psychology, and not so much what people say they want, but rather what they emotionally need to feel safe, is it any surprise that after just 11 years after the French literally chopped their king's head off, they don't just have another king, they have an emperor in Napoleon Bonaparte. But we're going to explore him on next week's episode. For now, let's keep zooming in on Robespierre. And the one thing that we've learned over the years, it's that the woke eat their own. By 1794, or year whatever the fuck he decided that was, I don't care, Robespierre was kind of running out of people to kill. And like, wait, do you remember that time he was like anti-death penalty, that he was a lawyer fighting against the death penalty? Do you remember that? I know, I don't know her, right, girl? Robespierre turned his crosshairs on his best friend, Georges Danton. Now, Danton was known for a big voice, a big personality, big ideas. I think I personally would have been like really into Danton. He was over 6 feet tall, he was hulking and imposing, and he had this magnetic, huge booming voice to match his hulking frame, dark curly hair, and a scar from a bull, like an actual bull that gored him when he was a kid, like, right? That's hot. And okay, maybe he had some pockmarks from smallpox or whatever. We can look past that. Think of Georges Danton as Jason Momoa plus a pirate plus Ernest Hemingway plus a lawyer. He was just larger than life. He was so irresistibly alive, but not for long. Messy Revolution Daddy drew the suspicion of Robespierre, but not because Robespierre actually thought he was betraying him. Danton was just being a little too moderate for fuck-ass Robespierre. And listen, if you're a moderate, like I am, you know what it's like to be at a party and get stuck talking to someone who's either super left or super MAGA. They are going to be outraged by your lack of outrage, because rage is all they have. It's their only card to play. It's the only thing that makes them interesting. These single issue identities that we see constantly everywhere in society, you cannot have any sort of normal or nuanced conversation with them. And I bet if they had the option to send people who disagreed with them to the guillotine, girl, they would. And Danton ran afoul of Robespierre because he's like, hey, Max, like, I think we should just kind of, slow it down on the beheadings. I think we need to focus on building a new government, right? At this point, like we've chopped off the king's head and everybody around him. Like, where are we going with this? And Danton was really confident in his popularity, and he refused to defend himself when Robespierre accused him of treason and conspiring against the revolution. And he thought, no one's going to execute me. Well, he was wrong. He was arrested in March 1794, denied a trial, and in April, his head hit the basket. But in true Danton fashion, he went out with a swagger, tossing the executioner lines like, "Show my head to the people. It's worth seeing. And don't forget to show it to Robespierre. He will follow me soon." And he wasn't wrong. Because the moment you take down your best friend, there's no one left to protect you when the mob decides it's your turn. And Robespierre's turn was coming fast. His paranoia was about to reach nuclear levels. His enemies were sharpening their knives, and the guillotine he'd fed for years was hungry for his own neck. So what can we learn from this bloody chapter in history? My biggest takeaway when I dive deep into the French Revolution is always beware of someone who is selling you a magic potion. And we usually know this about actual products. Oh my God, this one serum will fix your skin forever. Oh my gosh, this LED mask will replace a need for a facelift. Bitch, it won't. This cream is better than Botox. No, it ain't. We are like pretty attuned to that. We understand what snake oil is. But let's zoom out a little bit. Then we get into people telling us, not necessarily about a product, but they are the product. The guy who is just going to be the end-all be-all. He's going to fix all of your problems. And you know what? He might not even be the one saying that. That's when it's really toxic. When you are the one convincing yourself that if I just had a boyfriend, everything would be fine. If I was just this perfect weight, I would never be sad again. We can look at that with a little bit less clarity because our emotions are so involved, but we can still see, by and large, that's probably not true. I mean, yeah, having a boyfriend is the end of some problems, but it's the beginning of a lot of other problems that you wouldn't have if you were single. And now, pull back even further. What if someone is saying this about society? If we can just do this, America will be perfect again. If we can just fix this one thing, this one law, then we won't have to worry about blah, blah, blah. Is that true? I mean, we might not have to worry about the blah, blah, blah. We might not have to worry about this or that. But is it going to be the sweeping, incredible change we think it's going to be? And as this revolution also points out, do we even want enormous sweeping change? Or is that something that's always, kind of sounds great? I'm just going to quit my job and I'm going to live in Spain and I'm just going to get a houseboat. Like, I can't even take this. We say that, but most of us don't do it. And actually, you know who did sit around during COVID and was like, I'm going to leave the big city behind and I'm going to move to the country and I'm going to be a cowgirl. You know who did that? Me. I did it. I did that thing. And boy, oh boy, it's had some interesting outcomes. True, I don't deal with people sweating on me in the subway anymore. I don't see drug addicts on the street. I don't pay $1 jillion a month to live in something the size of a hotel room. But there's other downsides. We cannot move through life telling ourselves that there's just a magic wand for things. Certainly, if there's not a magic wand for like hair growth, do you honestly think there's a magic wand for society? For fixing all the evils? That is not how society has ever worked, ever in the history of societies. And you better beware for anyone who says differently. Because what they're after is something as old as civilization itself. Girl, they're just after power. They're just after power. And power can come wrapped in a very altruistic package, but they're going to make sure that their face is on the wrapping paper. They're going to make sure that everyone, when they think of that change, when they think of this glorious new society, is associating it with them. And I'm not anti-power. I'm not even anti-king. I'm just pro-honesty. And we can't expect to get this kind of honesty and transparency from our leaders the way you can't expect to get it from like the lady selling you this Korean snail, whatever. But you have to be able to deduce these things yourself and take everything that people promise you with just kind of a grain of salt. Even if they are completely well-meaning. This man does want to fix all your problems. This snail mucin does want to fix your skin. That doesn't mean it's possible. And so instead of just believing whatever someone is trying to sell us, we owe it to ourselves to pull back and say, why is this magic bullet so appealing to me? Why do I feel so desperate about this thing, about my hair, about my love life, about the state of the country? Why am I willing to just follow this blindly? Because why is the alternative so terrifying? And I'm not saying you want to sit around with wrinkles or to die alone or to sit in some sort of socialist hellscape. Not at all. But what about it feels so untenable and frightening that you kind of can't even look at it? So anyone who will look at it, you're just going to believe them. You just want them to do the work for you. Why is staying in a bad relationship or at a bad job feeling better than trying to find a good one? Another thing that sticks out to me here is Robespierre's villain origin stories. No mama, no daddy, no money. Men will just do literally anything besides therapy or writing in a diary, right? They will chop heads off of people rather than be like, I'm sad I didn't have parents. Or I feel like kind of a loser that everyone else at my school had money and I didn't. It's just crazy what drives people, this pathological need to prove everyone wrong. Prove them wrong. I'm gonna prove them wrong. Listen, you know who knows all about that? Me, I do. I driven by the exact same thing. And so in some sense, I get Robespierre. It takes one to know one, but you have to know when enough is enough. And I drive myself pretty hard. And I know that you girls do too. You really are such overachievers. It's very hard to rest. It is this constant threat of, if I rest, I'm going to fail, right? If I don't keep all the balls in the air, my entire life is going to come crashing down around me. And more than just anything logistical, because you might know you can go on vacation and you won't end up homeless. It's this emotional thing of, I'm going to let everyone down. And they're all going to whisper, we were right about her. We were right about her. But I think we owe it to ourselves to pause and be like, who the fuck am I even talking about, right? When I say, I'll show him, who is them? Who's the thems out there that I'm sticking it to by working 15 hours a day and never taking a day off and just always looking down on people who aren't working 15 hours a day? Who exactly am I sticking this to? Well, one day I sat down and I literally made a list. Who is it that I think is always whispering in the shadows about Shallon's never going to be anything? She's never going to make it. And do you know who it was? It was like some kid's mom, some other parent when I was 8 years old. And I don't even know that memory is even real. I think I sort of created this in my demented nightmare factory of a mind and told myself that, oh my God, all these people they just don't think I'm going to make anything of myself. No one actually ever said that to me. And if one person did, it was one vote of Shallon's a loser compared to like 500,000 votes of, hey, Shallon's got a good head on her shoulders. She's smart. She's capable. She's talented. She's going to go far. Yeah, no, I didn't, whatever. I don't want to listen to that. I want to listen to this one voice that honestly might not even be real. And I'm going to let it drive me into the ground for the rest of my life. Yay. We love this for us. When I really shined a light on that, I was so embarrassed. I think I might have even like writhed on the ground, just like overcome with retarded tingles and cringe. Because I'm like, I have let this phantom assumption, these phantom labels lurk over my life and drive me forever? What? Robespierre, when he went to this very prestigious school on scholarship, I have no idea what his experience was there. If people made fun of him, if they knew, if they even gave a fuck. Or if they're like, I don't know, yeah, he's just like one of the people. Oh, he doesn't have parents, he doesn't have money? I mean, a lot of people don't have money. This is France. They don't have bread. A lot of people don't have parents either. Their moms, die, and dads run off. That's what dads do. I don't know that what happened to him necessitated murdering tens of thousands of people. I just don't know that it did, Maximilian. I just don't know that it did. A better use of his time would have been to turn his villain origin story into his hero's origin story. To turn the worst aspects of his upbringing into fuel. And not to just do something absolutely insane and demented, but maybe something positive. And look, in his mind, he might have genuinely believed that he was. He might have genuinely believed that no, these people, they have to die. How many minutes are in an hour? Bitch, it's got to die too. We cannot abide this. It just can't happen. And I think this is another thing to be aware of, is we look at someone and their earnestness and we think it's valid. Well, I don't, honestly. And the reason I no longer believe that someone's earnestness entitles them to have a voice is because I got canceled. It's because I know what it's like when the mob comes and tries to drag you to their proverbial guillotine. And during all of the insanity of like COVID and after COVID and just woke culture in general, where everyone thinks that they're being offended gives them the right to have a platform and a voice. And wait, hold on. Settle down, everybody. Settle down, everyone. This person who identifies as a Swiffer, they're offended. Open mic. Tell us what's on your mind. Tell us how we have hurt you. Go fuck yourself. Are you out of your mind? Well, yes, usually is the answer. They are. They're being insulted or deciding they're insulted, because let's be honest, that's what it is, does not entitle them to a vote or a voice or a platform or power. They are not entitled to power just because they legitimately believe that they should have it. I don't give a fuck what you believe. I give a fuck what you've earned. America is a democracy. A democracy is ostensibly a merit-based system. You are elected to represent people from the smallest level to the highest level. And you don't get elected by just deciding you should be and deciding that you're offended and therefore everyone should listen to you. So to me, Robespierre's very possible legitimate belief in his own behaviors doesn't mean a hill of beans to me. The road to hell, as they say, is paved with good intentions. Intentions don't mean anything without strategy. And it was pretty obvious Robespierre and the people involved in the French Revolution, they didn't have any. They had absolutely none. And they were just kind of like, floundering around. Well, we renamed March. We're calling it Meadows now. Is that something? And the people were like, no, it is not. No. Because here's the gag. After they chopped everyone's heads off, you would think like, oh, well, obviously life got way better for the citizens of France, right? Well, it was a yes and no, right? In some ways, in the immediate aftermath, the peasants were freed from feudal obligations. They weren't working on these huge estates owned by nobles because the nobles were dead, and they weren't paying dues to their lord and working as part of these noble estates, right? Also tithes to the church, 10% of their income, which is not insignificant, that was abolished. Peasants were now considered citizens, not subjects, because there was no king. So like, okay, that's good. But remember the whole, there's only 3 days off in a month thing? Yeah, that wasn't just the end of it. War and the revolution, it brought food shortages, inflation, and chaos. Bread prices, they stayed very volatile, which is what had sparked the revolution in the first place. And taxes did not go away. They were just reorganized. And so nobles had lost privileges, but the burden on commoners was still really heavy. And out in the countryside, where people were ultra religious, and that's just kind of like par for the course in any country throughout any time period. Outside of cities, people are going to be more religious. Obviously, we see this in America, and it was true in the late 1700s in France. So these people who were deeply Catholic, they did not like these attacks on the church and the delegitimization of priests and all the shit talking on the Pope. And so that led to some civil wars and some massacres. And so because of all of this volatility that is the natural consequence of huge upheaval, whether it's in a country or in its own life, again, you are going to be prone to overcorrection. In France, it took the form of Napoleon. In America, it took the form of Donald Trump. In my life, it took the form of moving from New York City to Montana. What form is it taking in your life? Are you brave enough to look around and say, I might have overcorrected a little bit here? Cutting bangs? Drunk? After a breakup? Perhaps ill-advised, right? Fucking off from my job and going to Greece for 2 weeks, even though I can't afford it? Potentially bad. It's not something you need to be ashamed of, okay? And I have spent a lot of time unpacking why did I move to Montana and beating myself up about it, and worse, trying to stick it out to prove that, no, it's not an overcorrection. No. Me? No. But when I finally was like, yeah, okay, I don't know that I needed to go that hard. Or maybe I did. Or maybe I did in order to just get those wiggles out, see if the grass was greener. And for a while, it legitimately was. But now can I pause and say, all right, we got to find something more moderate. We need to find something more in the middle. That's what Danton was trying to say to Robespierre, and he lost his head. Is there someone, are there some things, people, ideas in your life that are the Danton, that are like whispering at moderation? And are you chopping its heads off? No, I don't want to listen to this. You are betraying me. You are betraying me. A lot of my friends are telling me to move to California or to Nashville. And I'm like, how could you say that? That would just be me giving up on Montana, getting run out of town. And they're like, no, it's actually just course correction. It's evaluating data and being like, okay, this might have worked for a time, but let's see what's next. What do we need now? What we needed then that led us here changes. Our needs change. And to stay obstinate and pretend that, no, I'm gonna stick with this. I choose my choice forever. I'm gonna ride this till the wheels fall off. Okay, well, maybe they have. So what's the plan now? It's never too late to course correct. It takes bravery though. It takes balls. And you know what, girl? While you're at it, maybe just have a little bread. That couldn't hurt either. That's it for this episode. You've been listening to Crowned and Cancelled. If you enjoyed it, leave a review, tell a friend, and don't forget, always stay sharp. And be sure to follow me, Shallon Lester, on YouTube, where I take celebrity events and unpack those for the strategy lessons we can learn. And if you've ever thought, this chick sounds like she might be kind of fun, and I do love all this history, come with me on some trips, babe. Head to my website, shallonlester.com, to see what adventures are up next. And join me for some 5-star luxury getaways with alpha females from all over the world. Until then, I'll see you next time right here. Thank you for listening.